Board here, share screen. Just as always, welcome everybody to Performance School today. And this will be our final Performance School of the 2020-2021 academic year. It's amazing. This is number 15 for us. So really neat opportunity for us that we've had, and really appreciate everybody that's made this happen. This is kind of a general lineup card for us today as we go down through. A reminder, been probably blowing everybody's email up with this over the past month or so, but we will be hosting our sports performance leadership team, our big summit professional learning opportunity next week on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons. We have split that into 2 days just due to the Zoom nature, and everybody's going to be probably still working and doing different things. We didn't want to take up an entire day for people. So it is from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon on both Tuesday and Wednesday. That's May 25th and 26th. There are registration links that have been sent out. Just follow that link. You can register, and it'll produce a Zoom link for you. And then that Zoom link will be used for both days, all events. So encourage you to join us if you have the opportunity. Please share that with your staff, and we look forward to that. Just a couple reminders for us as we finish the semester. Kind of talked about the summit just a little bit already, but always taking time to find opportunities. Oftentimes that's where improvements in performance happen, is just us looking to the future, planning, organizing. So for the summer, thinking about us as professionals, as coaches, as staff, as faculty, how can we use this opportunity in the summer to get ahead on health, development, spend time with family? What are the things that we can research and development that we may not have time to do during a regular calendar year? Look at the way we communicate. How do we teach certain topics? If I'm a sport coach, how am I teaching skill? How am I teaching tactics? If I'm a strength coach, how am I teaching athletic competencies? But just always evaluate how we're doing things. And just as always, great opportunity to build skills. All of our performance schools, like I mentioned, we've had 15 to date, are cataloged on the Penn State Performance Science YouTube account. I'll also create a list and send that out after this one. But all these are organized, and you can flip through these as you want. This is kind of one thing that we've rooted everything that we do with Performance School on, is the idea of a community of practice. So essentially a community of learners is what we're trying to establish. And if you look at a lot of the professional learning literature and things that are occurring within professional development or continuing education, depending on the field that you study, professional development is best received and impactful when it is intentional. Okay, so when I make an intentional effort to be engaged in that. When it is stranded, what that means is that continuing education that is stranded over time, longitudinal, over a career or over a year, is much more powerful than isolated incidents of, let's say, a conference or just a singular event. When it's engaged in community, it can be more powerful. So like the community we're trying to build here, if I engage with a lot of different people, oftentimes, I learn one thing by hearing it, and then I have a conversation with another staff member. Now it's been exposed to me twice, and then we have another conversation now 3 times. Those multiple events help me learn. And then when things are context rich or embedded in our field, it can really help us over time as well. Super excited today. I'm going to pass it over to Mitch Gerber. Mitch is our feature content specialist at Penn State University, works with all of our programs, especially the football program. Really looked up to Mitch for a long time, and really excited to have him here today to lead our conversation. So Mitch, I've got you with co-host ability. You should be able to click and share. And you got the floor, brother. Really appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. Appreciate all of you letting me talk today. Obviously, this is a very different conversation than some of the other ones that we've had. And I've sat in on a couple of them and have really enjoyed your guys' perspective on things. So this is something that I want you guys to try to be open-minded about, because it's a completely different area. that versus some other stuff that we've hit on compared to some of the sports performance side of things. This is more on the social media side of things, some of the pros and cons of it, if you will, and then just sports broadcasting, storytelling, and all of that in general as well. So please let this be as interactive as possible. I'm somebody that I think, for those of you that I've met, is somebody that likes to be very communicative and interactive. So stop me along the way. I'm going to call on people along the way to try to make sure that we can be as cohesive as possible. And Nelly, I liked your intentional learning. That's actually a topic that we're going to get into today with some of the sports broadcasting side of things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and stop me along the way if you have any questions, comments, concerns, any of that stuff. So as Nelly mentioned, my name is Mitch Gerber, and I am our feature content reporter for Penn State University. And what that means is basically I tell stories for a living across the board for 31 different teams, mostly with football here at Penn State University. Things we're going to learn about and discuss today specifically are stories beyond the playing surface. So as you guys saw on the graphic that Nelly put out, that's the whole point of this thing, is the stories that go beyond just the wins and losses, the stat categories, so on and so forth. Sports broadcasting, building relationships, and then the power of social media with that open-mindedness aspect to things. Now, I'm somebody that believes that, unfortunately, I believe we've gotten to a society where a lot of the questions we ask ourselves is, how is this going to benefit me, right? So pros and cons, whether you believe that or not, that's something that I believe is we've become a society where, unfortunately, it's how is this going to benefit me the most? And we're going to dive into that a little bit today. So how is this going to benefit me, this presentation? My biggest thought process when putting this together was, we're all in the people's business, right? So what I mean by that is every single day when we wake up, we have the opportunity to impact somebody's life. And every day that I get to wake up, I get to tell stories about people and to share different avenues of a brand like Penn State University, so on and so forth. So to me, we're all in this together. As Nelly alluded to, the intentional learning and the learning community, is something that I take a lot of pride in, and I'm sure you guys do too. So we're all in the people's business. We're all in this together, off the field, on the field, so on and so forth. Now, this is my first kind of interactive side to this presentation, if you will. And on the left and on the right, you see the Atlantic Ocean. So I don't know if anybody wants to unmute, but just describe to me the picture on the left. And this is something that I like to do during any presentation, but just describe to me, if you will, what you see with that picture on the left. Anybody?
I see a lot of energy.
I like that, Carl. A lot of energy, smooth, it's calm, but at the same time, it's got that energy. It's white. It's a perfect setting. It's almost comforting. It's somewhere where you probably want to sit there and have a Corona Light with a little lime in it, maybe a little tiki umbrella with some sort of drink. That's where you're going to go on vacation. That's the comfort spot. And I think, Carl, you actually talked about that at one point in time. And that's something that obviously you're comfortable with. You want to go on vacation there. It's smooth. It's perfect, right? Even though the word perfect might not necessarily exist. Now, the picture on the right, somebody describe to me what you see there. Same ocean, same beach, different picture.
Clutter, standoffish.
Clutter, standoffish. Good answer. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the opposite of the first picture. That's somewhere where you probably wouldn't want to spend a lot of time. It almost looks like it would be potentially dangerous, right?
Dangerous. That's a good analogy there. To me, the difference between these two pictures is, one is the smooth, it's going to be your comfort spot, and the other one has stories, right? So the stories are, how did that bottle of glass get there? How did that shampoo dispenser get there? Who's the guy on the right that's taking a picture, maybe cleaning up the trash? All that stuff in between there. So, well, we see a picture on the left that's comforting, it's perfect. And then a picture on the right is a little cluttered. It's confusing. It's got adversity in it, all that type of stuff. That's basically what my job is to do day in and day out for Penn State University. It's to be able to tell the story of how the bottle got there, how the soap dispenser plays a role in a certain situation on the beach. So yes, it's a far-fetched analogy, but it is very much prevalent to our life because You got the picture on the left that's smooth, it's calm, it's nice, it's warming. And then the picture on the right is all of your athletes. It's your coaches. It's your people within the university. It's the people within your athletic department, because every single piece of that beach, whether it has trash or not, it has a story, right? So what is a sports broadcaster? A sports broadcaster at the end of the day is a detailed storyteller who's highlighting the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Very simple, complex answer for what a sports broadcaster is. My biggest analogy when I tell people about what I do is I'm basically the 2 to 3 year old that asks the question, why? Now, I just happen to be somebody that is 28 years old and can do it on camera and ask the question why all the time. So I don't know how many of you have infants at home between the ages of 2 and 3, but their biggest question to you all the time is what? It's why. But why? But why are you doing that? Why? Because they're clearly trying to understand what is going on. So me as a sports broadcaster, my whole thing is I'm putting together the why, and I'm putting together that story of the beach to be able to tell a complete story to those that are watching our content. So when you think about Penn State football, for example, it is a 365-day-year operation. There's not a day that goes by where there's not something that's going on with Penn State football or somebody's tweeting about Penn State football. There's constantly that why question trying to be answered. Now, with that complete story, it's not perfect. There's going to be days like last season, for example, where there are some losses, and it's not necessarily a reflection of everything that's going on in Penn State football. So even though the approach which we all want to have success on the field, right, with the wins, you're not necessarily always going to get that. So our job is to be able to tell the complete story. And that takes all of us at Penn State University. That takes sports science, that takes social media, that takes trainers, that takes everybody, academic counselors, you name it. It takes everybody to be able to tell that complete story. Now, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. This is something that I have my foundation on every single day. So whether that be a conversation with somebody like Josh Nelson just in the hallway, whether that be a conversation during an interview with one of our athletes, the who, what, when, where, why, and how is such a simple concept to be able to break down your conversations, your relationships, and everything else in between there. So the who are you talking to? Who are you talking about? The who is a very simple idea. The what are you talking about? So if it's the Cotton Bowl, for example, well, we're talking about the Cotton Bowl. What's coming up at the Cotton Bowl? When is something taking place? The date, the time, the week. These are all concepts that when you start an interview, when you start a conversation that we'll go into in a second, is something that is very easy to think about, but it's very hard to do when you put yourself in front of a camera and you got thousands of people potentially watching you. Now, before I move to the next slide, what do you guys believe is the biggest misfortune, is the word I'm going to use, the biggest challenge that we as a society, not just sports broadcasting, but people in general face when it comes to the who, what, when, where, why, and how?
I want to say potentially ego, where I can't ask why or how or look like I don't know, so that limits my ability to ask questions per se.
That's a good answer. Anybody else?
I think along with that, the confirmation bias, that people look to find the thing that's going to confirm what they already believe, regardless of what facts may indicate to the contrary.
Another good answer.
I would agree. I would say shooting from the hip. A lot of times when we're communicating, we don't want to look like we don't know something. So we'll kind of just guess it, and then hopefully we won't get any questions that look bad. But that's definitely one of them.
100%. The overarching thing that I think all of you are also portraying to is we don't listen, right? And what I mean by that is we don't listen enough to the conversation that is in front of our face, that we're listening to, we're reading about, whatever it is. One of the biggest things that I face and our industry faces, and all of us, quite frankly, face on a daily basis, is listening with the intent to understand versus listening with the intent to reply. Difficult, easy, all of that to understand right there. So listening with the intent to understand is very much something that I have to put my hat on when interviewing a player, a coach, any one of you on the screen. listening with the intent to understand versus listening to the intent with reply. I think you guys are all shaking your head, so you definitely know what that means. Now, I'm going to play a clip here of an interview I did after one of our recent spring practices with PJ Mustipher, and I want you guys to put your broadcasting hat on for a second. Your Aaron Andrews, your Joe Buck hat, your Mitch Gerber hat, and when you listen to this answer that PJ Mustipher gives, think in the back of your mind what your follow-up question would be to him. So I'm going to play this, and you guys will kind of get a real-life example of how quick you have to think on your feet with the intent to understand while also trying to reply, but not conflicting the two.
You know, I want to be better, and I got to be better from last year. You know, it was a tough season. I didn't like the way I performed, and I want to perform much better. So, you know, I say I'm resilient myself because, you know, I'm not allowing last season to affect me. You know, I'm coming to work every day with the guys, and, you know, they're pushing me. I'm pushing them. We just going to keep getting after it.
All right. Anybody got their follow-up question?
How would you measure success?
That's a good one. Anybody else?
What is your plan of attack?
Plan of attack. I like that one. All right. So PJ Mustipher in the very beginning said, I want to be better. So for me, in the back of my mind, as a broadcaster, there's trigger words. Every day in our conversations, there should be trigger words for people. So if I'm talking to Carl about his family and he says something in the back of my mind, that triggers my next question, listening with the intent to understand, hear him out on the rest of his stuff. And my follow-up question might change in an instance, but also understanding that I got option A in the back of my head. So when I'm doing an interview with a guy like PJ Mustipher, I want to be better. Here's what I asked him.
You mentioned you want to be better. What specific areas do you want to improve in?
Just being stout in there, just being a dominant force in the middle. You know, I want the coaches to realize when it's a running down, I'm gonna be in that middle and it's not gonna hit out. In passing situations, I want to push the pocket and get to the quarterback. And I just want to help everybody around me. You know, if I'm doing my job at a high level, them guys beside me and the guys on the back end are doing their job, able to do their job.
So there's a quick example from PJ Mustipher about how quickly you have to think on your feet with this type of stuff. And Nelly, I want to go back to a point you made earlier about one of the biggest misconceptions of people listening and stuff like that. And it's ego, right? So how do you set yourself apart when it comes to the ego aspect? As a broadcaster, and really everybody from a daily standpoint, you need to be able to set that ego aside to be able to have a major impact within an organization, on a person, administrator, a coach, or a player. So for me as a broadcaster, it's not about me, right? My face may be the one that's on social media. My face may be the one that's all over the place on TV, but it's not about Mitch Gerber. It's about PJ Mustipher. So how are you setting up your athletes, your coaches, your administrators to be able to tell the complete story, to be able to be successful from their aspect of things? Now, this next clip, I've got one more example for you guys. Nick Lee, a Penn State wrestler here at Penn State University, was a national champion, I'm going to say about a month ago now. From the time that Nick Lee was a national champion, about 15 seconds later, he did an interview with ESPN just outside of the mat. From the time that he did that interview to the time that I talked to him is about 2 minutes. So think about this. When you're watching TV and you're watching his response, because this is virtual due to COVID, you've got about 2 minutes to think about your first question to be able to get this interview off the ground. So here's the ESPN clip, and then I want you guys to think about the first question you would ask.
It looked like you wore him down. It looked like you had the gas. What did you sense out there?
I was tired, but that's just the nature of wrestling. You get tired, and at the end of the day, you just gotta keep fighting.
Anybody?
My question, and this is a bias because of I do every day, would be how do you prepare yourself to finish strong when you're tired?
Very good. So here's the initial question that I asked Nick Lee.
Nick, you said during the broadcast that you felt fatigued in that overtime period. How did you stay poised to come out with a 4-2 sudden victory?
Yeah, I mean, I think just discipline is really important. Making sure that I'm, staying in good position, and just continuing to stick with the game plan, whether it's overtime or not. I always think of overtime as just an extension of the third period, right? It's like free wrestling. It's on your feet. So I just continued with the game plan, and it paid off.
Good. Carl, that's pretty much spot on from the what the question was right there. So nice job. I'm going to skip this follow-up question just for time. Now, why does this matter to me? Going back to my first point. Well, listening. Number one, if there's one big lesson I want you guys to be able to take away from this, it's just to listen. It's such a hard thing to do on a daily basis. But over the next week or two, just focus on your conversations when you are having a conversation with somebody and catch yourself thinking about that next reply, thinking about something else you got to do that night, whether it be a 2 to 3 year old or whether it be your wife, your husband, whoever it might be, a coworker, whoever it is. Just think about listening and that aspect of things. Dive deeper into the surface. So as a storyteller, I'm always trying to dive into what the actual story is. There's a surface level story that we all know about, the wins and losses on the field. But at the end of the day, there's a story within that story. So for a guy like PJ Mustafer, well, he's talking about spring practice, but now I'm going to be able to take that clip when he has a heck of a performance this fall on the field. We talked about that last spring. So there's the deeper story to the deeper story. We're all detailed storytellers wanting to know the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We've already touched on that. And then at the end of the day, guys, we're all humans. We're not perfect. We're that beach that has the bottles, the shampoo bottle, the dirt, the grime. We're not the perfect beach on the left that had the picture perfect sand with a Corona light and a lime sitting in there. We've all got stories. We've all got issues as far as adversity and stuff goes on a daily basis. Building relationships. This is something that I'm huge on, and I know I've only got a couple of minutes left here, but building relationships is a huge side to what we all do on a daily basis. Communication, I believe, is key. Not everybody functions the exact same way you do. So dealing with 31 different sports, administrators, coaches, athletes, personnel on a daily basis, everybody is different. The hardest part about being a sports broadcaster on this side of things is knowing that not everybody is the same. So if I'm having a great day, Carl could be having a crappy day. He could be having the worst day of his life. So understanding how to approach conversations and listening to them, back to that listening concept, knowing what's going on in their life and being able to ride the wavelength with them, because at the end of the day, everybody's trying to tell their story, right? And again, it's not about Mitch Gerber. It's about the person that you're talking to. Trust is everything. You guys know that. The more that you can build trust with your athletes, your coaches and staff members, the more that they're going to give to you, the more responses they're going to give to you, the better stories that they're going to be able to tell. And then the last thing here is follow up and check in. I'm a guy that loves to follow up on conversations. So if I'm having a conversation with Josh Nelson here, I'm going to follow up with him, ask him how his family's doing, ask him how his kids are doing, all that type of stuff, because that makes an impact on somebody. So a big piece of advice is just to follow up and check in on people. Nick Lee, who we were just talking about, he's training at the Olympics right now for wrestling. He qualified for it. And so I followed up with him yesterday, for example, and just said, how you doing? Check in. Because if they understand that you're somebody that cares about them versus just coming to them because you need something, the likelihood that they're going to give more back to you is very high, very high. Share your story. This is the social media side of things. It starts with you guys. It starts with all of us, because as a brand, it starts and ends with us, because we know the story better than anybody else. We know the story about Penn State athletics better than Joe Schmo on the street. Joe Schmo may think that he knows the story better, but you guys are around this thing 24/7, 365 days a year. Here's a quick little social media breakdown for you and the impact that it can have. So I want to give props to Josh Nelson, because he puts himself out there on social media when it comes to telling his story. He gives back to athletes, he gives back to coaches, gives back to staff members about how to recover better, for example. That goes a long ways. Twitter has 353 million active users. The point of this breakdown is, don't be afraid to share your story. A lot of people are going to sit there and say, Carl, I see you posting on social media. Should you really be doing that? Carl, what was your message there? Carl, you're kind of annoying right now. So be it. You have swag, even though it says right here you have no swag. That's a problem that we face as sports broadcasters and on the social media side of things. A lot of what we do is a lot of fans and other people coming back to us and basically telling us that we don't matter. How do you deal with that psychologically? So at the end of the day, what are your dreams? What are your aspirations? What story can you guys tell on your level of things? And it's not just Penn State football's job to be able to tell that story. It's all of us. It takes all of us to put that story together. So that's a quick little breakdown for you guys. I want to leave a couple of minutes for questions here, just about anything that we do on the social media side of things, any questions you might have about sports broadcasting, so on and so forth. But first off, appreciate you guys allowing me to do this brief little conversation. And if you see me in the hallway, see me on the field, whatever it is, please stop me and let's have a conversation and be able to do that listening exercise.
I have a question. My daughter just recently graduated with her bachelor's in mass communications, and her intent is to be a sports broadcaster.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice, I know this is not on topic, but it looked like nobody was going to ask any questions, so I'll ask. What kind of advice would you suggest I give her for jumping in right away? Because she's kind of discouraged about, where to start.
Yeah. My first piece of advice that immediately came to my head is it's very, very hard. Think about the amount of sports broadcasters you see out there. Think about the amount of people that want to try to get into this industry. It's tough. So the more that you can be able to establish your foundation, what I mean by a foundation is set your personal core values. We at Penn State football obviously have the core values of the 4 core values that Coach Franklin follows on a daily basis. But what is your core value? For me, it's be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I follow that every single day. So first of all, you got to be able to be comfortable with yourself. But number 2, as a sports broadcaster, you try to be somebody else that you're not. And it takes a long time, a lot of reps to be able to become just yourself. So piece of advice there for young sports broadcasters is get the reps in, because the more that you can be yourself, the higher likelihood is that you're going to have success in this industry. And then at the end of the day, it's hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a lot of hours. It's demanding. It's when you guys turn off the clock after a game is done, for example. Yes, you guys have some more work to do after the fact. But then for me, I've got to sit there for a few hours, if not more than that, after the competition, just putting together that story. And that's 365 days a year. So you got to be able it's ambitious. It's hard, but it's rewarding. Good question.
Thank you.
Hey, Mitch, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Just thinking back on everything that you've done to date, do you have a favorite moment and a least favorite moment?
Least favorite moment is making the mistakes, but at the same time, you have to make those mistakes to understand. I'll give you an example. Last year, Antonio Shelton, during a live show, during one of our live pregame shows, came up to our set, just took a microphone and said that he will not be returning to Penn State University. I have no control over what he says, no control over that moment. But looking back, could we have done something as a collective unit to be able to make sure he doesn't do that? Yes. So you learn from that type of stuff. Best moment, I don't know that I have a one that necessarily sticks out. I've covered the College World Series with the University of Florida. That was an awesome moment to be able to be on the field and capture that moment, hear from those guys after. The Cotton Bowl was a lot of fun. People ask me who the most famous person is that I've interviewed. I would probably say Kenny Chesney before his concert in Dallas, Texas. That was pretty cool. He talked about football and his connection to it. So those are probably a few of my best moments, but I'm hopeful that I can cover Super Bowl at some point in time. That's next on the checklist.
Mitch, I have a question, and it kind of pertains to one of the reasons we wanted to have you on here, and 2, point we made about ego. I think a lot of the things that you had mentioned within one of your slides about, the why, the how, the who, the what, the digging deeper, asking questions. I see that so applicable to what we do within sports science, because we're trying to not just sports science like the way we have here, but just like in inquiry and learning more about the way we train and compete and prepare for sport. We need to create a narrative about what are the demands of a game for our athletes so we can better train them. But oftentimes, and this is just a full disclosure about myself, oftentimes I find myself getting ready to respond without actually listening. So I guess what I was thinking is how do you break that down? How do you prevent yourself from trying to either correct or go a different route? Or how do you dig deeper and listen so that you can actually find the truth to something as opposed to, being right.
Yeah, it's very hard, and I struggle with it every single day. Think about how many times you pass people in the hallway. You and me, for example. Nelly, how you doing? Great. You're just going, right? You're constantly going. So I go back to the trust factor, and I think about athletes specifically, like you just alluded to. The more that you're around, and yes, sometimes it sucks because you're not around family, you're not around friends, all that stuff. The more that they're going to trust you. So when you ask them questions about their family, for example, if I know Yetur Gross Matos for 3 years versus the first time I met him, he's going to give me a lot more because he trusts me. He knows I'm not going to throw him under the bus. So it's constantly asking those questions about, hey, how you doing, Nelly? How's the family? How's the kid? Everything like that. Now, from an athlete's perspective, how are classes going? What are you doing outside of football? They're so tired of talking about football. Every single day is football. A lot of people just know them as the guy with the helmet on with the number 24 across their chest. You got to be able to tell them and relate to them beyond just that. So for me, when I approach an athlete, it is asking those questions about things going on outside of football, following up with them on a text message or phone call, checking in with them, seeing how they're doing. So I think the biggest piece of advice I can give from that standpoint of things is just show you care, because that's all they want at the end of the day. And it's a very hard thing to do when you're listening to them. Listen with that intent to understand versus listening with that intent to reply. And it takes a long time to be able to do that, especially during the interview process. One thing that I struggle with is when I'm talking to somebody like Coach Franklin, for example, we're trying to preview the upcoming game. There's things you have to get in from a sponsorship standpoint, from a requirement on a specific question, stuff like that. But for you guys, it's listening with that intent to understand and getting those trigger words like I want to be better. PJ, like how can we help you be better? What do you want to be better in? Because then you're going to understand. And then that just opens the door for family stories. That opens the door for friends. That opens the door for a whole bunch of different things. So it's just listening with that intent to understand.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mitch, a lot of things you said about building relationships and the trust. You're talking about that from a media perspective. Hey, that's recruiting and that's interacting with our student athletes, our alumni across the board. So all those things, that template fits a lot of things of success, and you can get people to really buy into what you're trying to do.
Definitely. Yeah. The recruiting side of things is crazy, as you guys know. And just that building the relationship side of things, it's every single day, right? It's a 365-day-a-year process. But when it comes back to that trust and the building the relationships, and I think you're exactly on with that point, Donald, is just it's a recruiting thing at the end of the day too, because if you're winning, your program's successful on the field, the relationships are strong. For those of you that have been around Penn State football, you know how this place operates. It's a very family-oriented thing. But at the end of the day, wins and losses affect recruiting. And it all comes back to the relationship side of things and how strong are those relationships.
Right.
Good point.
You have a family visit your campus for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
After driving 3 hours home. It's 9:30 at night. They get back. You put a phone call to that mother or father as a parent. Hey, did your son or daughter get home safely? Goes a long way. It's bigger than an X and O. It's bigger than, talking about a job. You're building a relationship and a career.
Definitely. And for example, Micah Parsons, who just got drafted in the first round by the Dallas Cowboys from Penn State. Great example there is building the relationship with his parents too. It's parents, it's friends, it's siblings, it's all that stuff that's going to have an impact. It's not just the coach or the athlete. So I think it goes just to what you were saying with the drive home. Hey, mom, how you doing? How was the drive home? Dad, tell me about the thing over in Harrisburg with Micah getting the key to the city. All that stuff to basically show that they care. And it goes back to the ego standpoint. Everybody just wants to be loved a little bit, right? So how can you rub their back a little bit to be able to open the door for more things? Anybody else?
We are at the 30-minute mark. We traditionally kind of break here. If anybody needs to hop off, everybody's more than welcome to stick around to continue to have a conversation. As always, really appreciate everybody for joining us. Mitch, thank you so much for doing this. We really look up to you and what you do for us, not just within your role, but who you are. You always, he is the truth. Like he is telling the truth as he talks about being interested in everyone that he talks to. It's not just part of his job. So we really appreciate that and we recognize that. But thanks for leading this, Mitch. This was awesome.
You bet. And I'll absolutely leave the last point right there with what you just said. Be truthful, be honest, be yourself, because the more that you are versus being fake, people are going to respect you and they're going to understand you and open that door. So be honest, be truthful. And please call me, text me, email me, whatever you want to do if you have any questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. If you want to stick around, please do. If not, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Donald. Thank all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good to see you.
You too.
Mitch, I have one just kind of question. I love the idea of what you're talking about with the social media. And one observation that I've had is it's helped me be a better kind of a speaker, because you do get scrutinized a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think the main platform that I've tried to use social media for is not necessarily reporting a story, but more of an educational thing or behavior change. So typically have addressed a topic with a team per se, and then followed up with a social media post or something like that. How, just from what we've done within some of the departmental things, how could we improve that based upon what you're thinking? Or, maybe it's something for offline, but, I think that's what's always in the back of my mind, how we can use social media as an online classroom.
Yeah. I think your first point about being scrutinized and stuff, it's very real, right? It's hard to put yourself out there. It took you, Nelly, a while to be able to get to that point, I'm sure. When you first came to Penn State University, you weren't just posting. Now I can turn on Twitter any morning. I'm going to see something from Josh Nelson. It's almost become like daily reading for me. It's not necessarily to say I'm going to sit there all the time and listen to your full spiel or anything like that. But I think for you guys and the area that you're in, I think it's more than just helping student athletes. I think you're helping people, which is a hard thing to do on a daily basis. So the more that you put yourself out there, the more comfortable you're going to be able to be telling that story, because it is a very uncomfortable tool to use most of the time, especially when you're getting, hey, why are you doing that? Why are you posting this? Like, it gets old hearing that same conversation, but at the same time, like, the more that you do it, the more that you put yourself out there, the better you're going to be. So I think for you guys, telling that complete story of not just how is this going to help our athletes or how is this going to help a coach, but how is this going to help a person just in life? For example, the podcast that we do, I was so focused first on how are we going to tell the story about Penn State football? Why are you coming to Penn State University? How great of a coach is James Franklin? All great. People want to hear it. But at the end of the day, people also want to hear about the person that is inside that person. So KJ Hamler, when he was back in town, did a podcast with him. We went off the rails for like 20 minutes. If you guys listen to that, it's all comical stuff. We're doing things that these guys care about. So I think for you guys, maybe it is doing one of your little spiel things with a student athlete. Maybe it's with a coach. Maybe it's you dress it up a little bit more. It's all hard stuff to do, and you just got to try and fail and succeed at some things. We do that every single day on the social media side of things. Sometimes it takes off. Sometimes you're like, I just put in hours into that and it did nothing. So I think it's just putting yourself out there, and it is uncomfortable, but the more that you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, Mitch, unfortunately, I have to jump off here for another one because I could sit and talk about this stuff all day long, but I did want to put an exclamation point on something that came up, what Don had said earlier. I think what you shared today would make every single, I can't think of a person it wouldn't make better at what they do. Now, part of it, it's speaking, again, my bias that I bring to a situation is I look at everything through what I do every day. My field is not great at teaching people to be curious. It's better at teaching people that they have the answers to all the questions, and that's not true ever. And one of the things that we drive here as a philosophy is to be curious, do life together, and then at some point you can help people kind of connect their own dots so they take ownership of something. So I don't care if you're teaching, coaching, counseling, whatever, that whole attitude, and I'll use the word attitude because I think that's something you bring with you, an attitude of curiosity is massively helpful. So that's, I would just encourage everybody to think about that. You know, how do you prepare for those listening to understand? Well, it starts with being curious, I think.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because you think about you and I interacting, for example. Well, I'm a very curious person, so I'm always in tune to what you're saying, but I could be somebody else and not care about what you say at all, right? So it's how do you get people curious about your specific topic? And I think that's a very hard thing to do, but love that point there.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. There's an art to it, right? But it's also you go back to the student development theories, and it's meet them where they are. Like meet them where they are and walk alongside them. It's much easier to be curious. That's why Ken Revisit penned a beautiful article back in the 70s about gaining entry with teams, and it all started with being around.
Yeah.
Being around, pick up the cup, pick up a ball, whatever. Just be there, being in their environment, not yours.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much. I really
Thanks, Carl.
Take care, guys.
Thanks, Carl.
Mitch, I had a question too.
Go for it.
Talking about the social media stuff, made me think about it. At the beginning of your presentation, you had on there your logo, your personal logo.
Yeah.
What led you to want to get a logo, right, for your personal brand? But then also, once you got it, were there things that it kind of helped do to promote you or Penn State or whatever?
Yeah. I don't, full disclosure, I don't know what your guys' industry is like as far as competition, who you're going up against, stuff like that. So for me, my goal is, and I think I've told multiple people on this call, and I've told all kinds of different folks what my goal is to make it to the NFL. And then after that, hopefully be Reese Davis one day hosting College Game Day. It's a very high goal, but this field is very competitive, sometimes for better or for worse, especially where we're at currently in society. So all of these little different things set yourself apart. So when somebody comes and sees you and is looking to hire a new on-air talent, for example, I had an NFL team reach out to me 2 years ago just because somebody's cousin at Penn State plays here on the football team. They saw me do an interview with him. They went to go look at my stuff. Well, my logo led them to my website. So I have a website that's kind of a landing page. So for me, it's kind of like, it's a showcase of look what I've done at Penn State University and elsewhere. This is what I could do for you, type of thing. Now, you may be very content here at Penn State University. You may want to stay at Penn State, but I still believe that if you brand yourself, you have that personal brand to you, and everybody knows who John is, you're going to be more successful. And it's a hard thing to do, back to the social media standpoint of putting yourself out there, because a lot of people are just going to sit there and say, stop it, John. Like, I don't care. I'm going to turn it off. Well, great. I don't really want you around anyway, right? So I think to the logo, the website, all that stuff, all that's created on purpose because I'm trying to ultimately get to somewhere. And I love it at Penn State, don't get me wrong, but that's not my ultimate goal.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
You bet.
If anybody has another question, please interrupt me. But so this came up. This is, Anna and I were talking about this the other day too. Not providing context or any other thing, but think about this. I think another powerful thing as I'm learning to be kind of a department leader or, like a manager of a small group of people, we work on hiring, we work on inventorying people's backgrounds. So when I'm looking at somebody potentially, the first thing you're going to do is to go into their social media. One, to see, what they've done, but two, to make sure that they're not posting anything really inappropriate. So for me, as I'm learning to become someone that's in charge of, different groups of people, if there's no social media there, is that a red flag? It may not be, but I would like to have somebody, even with just a moderate amount of presence. I think that gives me a little bit more assurance than someone that has no presence.
That's a great question. From my aspect of things, yes, you should. we're in 2021, right? If you are looking to hire in your department and that's a part of what you guys are trying to do, they should absolutely have a presence. And if they don't have a presence, the question is why? If they're a great person, they've got all the accolades, all that type of stuff, ask them the why question. Why aren't you on Twitter? Why aren't you on Instagram? Now, yes, from an HR standpoint, you have to ask the baseline questions and stuff like that. But I think somebody that does a great job of going deeper in those situations is Michael Hazel. You guys know him. He pushes the boundaries when it comes to that type of stuff. But for me, I go back to the why question. And I like literally, guys, the amount of time that I ask why to somebody is almost to the point of annoyance where they're like, just because that's the way it is, right? Well, why is it that that's the way it is? And I'm just such a like curious person, even during tough times. During the NFL draft, we had some miscommunication within the football department, video department specifically, and it's going back and reflecting on those tough conversations to be able to say, why did this happen? How can we get better from this? So from the hiring standpoint, I would just ask the question, why? And if they're not, and that doesn't align with what you guys are trying to do, well, then maybe there is a red flag there. Maybe they are trying to hide something. And I think when you ask that why question, you can get a pretty good feel. You guys are all smart people. You can get a good feel on what that person is all about.
That's huge. That's huge.
I have a quick question. Have you ever found yourself in an interview and just completely blanking on a question or what to say next? Like you got nothing. And if you find yourself in that situation, like, do you have a trick to snap out of it or to fall back on to get you out of that super awkward situation?
Yes. And that happened to me not too long ago. I can't remember where. It might've been during one of those after spring practice interviews. My baseline for that is the hard part about what I do selfishly is it's all on camera. It's all public. People are seeing this, whether it's live or tape. I can't screw up. I screw up, and my screw up is not necessarily something that you would catch. But for me, in those situations, even when you're having a conversation with somebody, go back to the fundamentals, right? So the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Well, where did all this come from? Why are we here? What are we talking about? So during the spring practice, for example, if I'm talking to PJ Mustafer and I just completely forget what I'm possibly even talking about, well, I know for a fact that we're here talking about Penn State football. I have not had a situation yet where it's like I've completely got a concussion on the spot during an interview and just lost complete train of everything, knock on wood. But I think during a conversation, if that happens to you, just go back to the fundamentals. So the family, the friends, the program, what's going on with Coach Franklin, what's going on with Penn State football, all of those different things, because you're going to like that stuff is going to happen to you. Fortunately, you guys are in a different business where you can screw up and it doesn't matter. Nobody cares. For me, it's you screwed up, fix it. Good question, though.
That's great. Thank you.
Bryce and Anna, I feel like you guys got to have a question now.
They've all been taken.
They haven't been taken. You got a question?
Only one that comes to my mind would be, do you find it hard to humanize these athletes, as it's 107,000 every weekend here, or just like knowing that once you put on the blue and white, that it's almost like you're a professional?
Yes, very. It's very hard. And it's very hard to selfishly not get caught up in it too. When you're walking through team arrival and people are saying, Mitch, they look pretty dang good, right? But at the same time, you got to humble yourself because you're there for a reason. Your job is to tell the story. And these guys are recruited as 5-star recruits, 4-star recruits, 3 stars. All they know is success, whether it's been easy for them or hard for them. Most of the time it's been easy because they're the best athlete on their high school team. But once they get here and the bright lights are on and they get more stardom and stuff like that, and their face and their name starts to get out there in the national media, it gets tough to work with them sometimes because then you're just little Penn State. For example, Micah Parsons, when he was drafted, well, yes, I have a great relationship with Micah, his family, his parents specifically, but that's through years of work to be able to just get in the same room as him after he gets drafted by the Dallas Cowboys to be able to get an interview with him. I'm one of the few people that he was able to do that with because he knows my face, because he knows who I am. But at the same time, he's getting pulled by ESPN, ABC, Fox, all these different people. So the higher up you go with these athletes and the more stardom that they get, the more you have to, fortunately or unfortunately, build that relationship to be able to maintain it. So when the time comes for the NFL draft, the Super Bowl, whatever it is, that you still have an impact to be able to get inside that room. Good question.
Okay. Have you
Yeah, Anna.
always been a good listener, or like, was that something that you had to work on once you knew you wanted to go into this field? And then if it's something that you've had to work on, are there certain tools that you use to get better at it?
I'm still terrible at it. Like, I'll fully admit that. I've gotten a lot better. One thing that I do have is a broadcast coach. So think of it like a coach on the field, for example, right? So every week or bi-weekly, I try to meet with her, and she absolutely grills me. She'll watch my interviews back. It's super uncomfortable. So for example, if Nelly and I are sitting here looking at his Twitter post from today, for example, I would absolutely grill Nelly about what he's talking about. And it's a tough thing to do. It's uncomfortable, but it goes back to my motto about being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so I think the biggest thing for me is just putting in those reps and understanding that you have to listen. It's not just during an interview. It's also in the hallway. It's Anna seeing you down in the team lounge and saying hi, asking how you are, and actually listening with the intent to understand what's going on in your life so that I can follow up on that in future situations. The hardest thing that I battle on a daily basis is all these different people. You guys have all these different people too, right? With athletes and coaches. I have all these different people, from administrators to coaches to athletes to people in the community, people in the public, that you got to keep their stories straight. I can't tell you the amount of times where I've gone to Nelly and said, how are the kids? You only have one kid, right? Yeah. So how many times have I made that mistake? And then he says, oh, so-and-so's doing great. Ah, shit. Like, he's only got one kid. But it's just doing it time and time again and being able to practice that listening side of things. And it's tough because we do it selfishly every single day, but it takes time.
Awesome. Anything else?
Thank you, guys.
Mitch, man, really appreciate it. And we're not saying this just because, work in the same building, but we really appreciate you and look up to you, man. You're awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And please, if you ever have story ideas, come this way. I'd like to do some stuff with you guys to be able to break down some of the scientific terms and stuff like that, because I think the more that we dumb it down for the public, like golfing for dummies type of thing, the more that people are going to understand. And I think that's what we try to do every single day. So if you guys have those ideas, if you have something, text me, call me, email me, let's make it happen.
Will do. Sounds good, man. Well, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.